You can't even imagine it wasn't the first time the secretary and the accountant had talked during business hours, and the boss, who realized it when he returned from the meeting, was furious. He thought he paid well to his employees, who occasionally gave awards instead of working responsibly and completing the tasks they corresponded to on time. They spent the hours in incessant conversation, but if they had so much free time, however, he glimpsed a photograph open on his secretary's computer screen. It was a very talented portrait of a beautiful woman, but the man was not impressed with the condensed work, but with how much that woman looked like his wife. The secretary, who finally noticed her boss's presence, began to nervously close everything unrelated off to work on her computer, making quick clips of bad guys everywhere. Meanwhile, the accountant dashed off to her office, scaring them because that's how they learn, Xavier thought to himself, and even considered reprimanding them, but the portrait drew his attention so intensely that the entire world forgot how a blind artist could paint such a person, and not anyone else, but his wife. Where exactly did you see this portrait? Javier asked the secretary to just please don't try to prove to me that the conversation took place outside working hours. He heard everything perfectly, thank God, and my ears still didn't deceive me. The secretary heeled strongly but immediately pulled herself together and, very happy, started telling her boss about a young artist who painted wonderful pictures, including portraits, and sold them in the park on the way to the office. The strange thing is that the man does not see anything. He is blind, but he is so good at work. He has finer facial features. Of course, he escapes all the details, but his ability to paint wonders how is a great enigma. The secretary finished her story. Javier decided to take a walk in the park before lunchtime and buy that portrait if the artist was still there. He really wanted to surprise his wife by showing her this masterpiece, and he was sure he would recognize himself in it. After all, it looked so much like the photo of her as a young girl walking in the park. The man found the artist around. There were a lot of people, and from the voices full of admiration, you could see that everyone gathered there. They loved the works of the blind painter, who, to Javier's surprise, turned out to be a young boy. As they left, some held a purchased painting in their hands. Javier noticed that the color tones in landscapes, portraits, and still lives did not always correspond to what was usually seen around them, but it was something that, on the contrary, gave a special charm to the paintings, making them almost magical or something like that. After having found with their eyes the work for which Javier felt his hair chill, he saw two more portraits of the same woman next to that. Well, what a coincidence! He still couldn't believe that everything he was seeing was painted by an artist named Blind. It's true that he doesn't see anything he paints. The man asked the artist quietly. He shuddered and turned his head towards the source of the voice. Actually, I see a lot, but only inside my head. My imagination works much better than my eyes that closed a while ago. And probably the artist lowered his eyes a little, and Javier recoiled in horror because the look of his eyes was not pretty. In his case, there must have been a long queue of people willing to undergo this kind of treatment, and the most normal thing was that the price it was about half of Javier's savings when an unpleasant feeling inside him began to grow, and in the end, he bought all the boy's paintings and paid far more than he had asked as a young artist, but he was still tortured with excitement, fingering the bills in his pocket one more time. Realizing that what had just happened to him was extremely rare, Javier quickly got into his car and drove home with his groceries in the back seat. What he didn't think about was asking that boy who really was that beautiful woman who appeared in the portraits, because he just wanted to get rid of the feeling and action of being useless as soon as possible, because it was very difficult for him to be next to someone he wanted to help and not be able to do so. Javier no. He allowed Daniela to work because he was firmly convinced that the man should not deny his wife any whim. He paid for her beauty treatments, massages, swimming pool, and various types of training would be fate, but the couple lost their first child shortly after his birth, so God did not give them any more children, so they had no heirs to their fortune. Sometimes has difficulty accepting even his own child. Besides that, it would be horrible to start thinking endlessly about that baby. They couldn't save the man. There was a woman who dedicated herself to financially helping the orphanages. From time to time, she checked that her funds were being spent on what was needed until Daniela volunteered to help him and was delighted to do so, but still, they didn't seem willing to take someone else's child. Because despite the fact that many years had passed, their hearts had not healed from that pain, which was still there like a bleeding scar that was constantly remembered. My love has a surprise for you here today. I decided to buy a painting by an artist I saw in the park near our office. The man made me very sad, and this portrait caught my eye. Javier showed his wife the portrait, and she gasped. "It looks like you, right?" Javier told her how he saw a photograph of that portrait at work and how he later went to the park to see this masterpiece painted by a blind artist himself, but his wife dismissed the fact immediately, saying it was probably a marketing stunt for her, or more likely that someone tried the paintings and then fooled everyone, saying it was the work of a poor blind artist to sell light for the highest price. But when the husband mentioned that the price charged by the artist was the highest price charged by the artist, she dismissed "I can't explain." Daniela said she was stunned for several days, unable to take her gaze away from the portraits, unable to believe such an incredible resemblance was real. The beautiful young woman in the portrait seemed more and more familiar, but Daniela did not recognize herself in her, and besides, how could a blind artist know her that I never knew? Sometimes, while Daniela was in front of the portrait, she started crying and said that could be her daughter, and one day she called her husband and told him, "Hey, I've seen it, look at that, look at the shape of her eyes, it's like that, you have it, but it's not the most important thing, look at this little spot next to temper, it looks a lot like a birthmark, and it's exactly like yours." Of course, it's possible the painter has moved the brush without realizing it, but such a resemblance makes one think Javier had not paid much attention to these details. But Daniela's emotional state also affected him. Seeing how much his wife was concerned about all this, the man decided to invite the young man to his home to ask him personally about all those things that caught his attention so much he asked his wife's chauffeur to bring the blind artist home by offering him a delicious dinner and seducing him with a generous reward for the visit. However, the driver, who was afraid that the owner would scold in case he failed, he decided to guarantee his success and take the man by force. "What is happening? What do you want from me? Why was I brought here without my consent?" The young man was intrigued and was still holding his palette and brush. Javier hurried to reassure the artist and assured him that no one would get hurt. He apologized for his driver's behavior, saying that maybe he was dutiful, email, and invited the boy for coffee. The artist introduced himself as Lorenzo. He turned out to be a very intelligent and perceptive young man, although at first his voice trembles with emotion and fear. Shortly afterwards, he calmed down and found himself a little more relaxed. "Tell me, Lorenzo, how do you distinguish colors?" suddenly Javier asked. Daniela managed to enter the conversation at this point, placing a plate of freshly baked pastries on the table and looking at the artist, a young man of about 25. Daniela knew they had never met because she would remember. Daniela and Javier began to listen with interest to the story Lorenzo told them. "My girlfriend is assisting me by making some marks on the tubes of paint so I don't get the colors wrong. She also enjoys painting, but she now has to work for both of them, so I try to sell my paintings to help her in some way." The guy told them that in his second year of university, he was forced to quit to join the army, which is where the accident that left him blind occurred. "Every feature of her face and my fingers are the ones that help me remember her beauty day by day. And of course, I regret not being able to see her again now that I am alone. I thank God for knowing Maria, as every day I ask her to leave me because I don't want to be a burden for her. I love her and wish her the best, even if it is without me." Lorenzo pronounced the last words with a disappointment he didn't try to hide. "So you're saying that in the pictures I bought of you, it's your girlfriend that appears?" Xavier frowns. "That's right, you're right. Although the truth is that I don't know if I can convey the features of your face well and capture the colors. Maria always says that everything is perfect, but I know very well that even a person who sees sometimes can't find the colors right, and even more so when you can't see them. That's why you don't charge a higher price for the paintings I sell. I'm ashamed to ask so much for something I haven't seen." In September, Daniela asked, "Will you be there?" A cup of coffee fell from Daniela's hands and a scream escaped her lips. She couldn't believe it was possible, but Lorenzo had already been too many coincidences. The couple exchanged glances, and then both realized they were thinking the same thing and began asking Lorenzo to arrange a meeting with Maria. Daniela admitted to the young man that she suspected Maria was a relative but remained silent for a while about the degree of kinship. For a while, the young artist couldn't get rid of doubts and was very worried that he couldn't suddenly start trusting hitherto unknown people who dragged him to their home by force, but he said it looked good to be among the four and commented that Maria was going to stop by the park to pick him up there. Javier paid a more than important amount for the paintings, but Maria even screamed with joy when she saw that pile of money in the afternoon when she shyly approached her boyfriend. Javier and Daniela approached him, speechless at the striking resemblance he bore to Daniela, but they didn't truly believe in the fact that both had thought it would be a lot of pain if they lost their daughter again, believing that she had been found while it could have been another woman. When Javier Daniela told Maria about her suspicions, the young woman agreed to have a DNA test, and thanks to this, he would know for sure that the parents and daughter had found each other again, even though the results were ready in such an unusual way. 3 weeks later, Daniela and Javier opened an envelope with trembling hands, and when they saw the result, they started to cry. Maria was your real daughter. It was difficult to believe. It never occurred to them that they had been duped. They believed their daughter was dead, and now the question was whose baby was supposed to be buried. When they contacted the hospital's maternity ward, they only discovered that there had been an error that day. The human factor was busy. As the chief physician stated. However, this error cost those who cried for their little girl for years, and while the girl was sitting at the orphanage window waiting for her relatives to take hold, it turned out that the midwife was not feeling well that night and heard many births at the same time, so Maria was mistaken for a girl who was born to an alcoholic mother whom she rejected and died almost immediately after birth due to complications. All the media was talking about the terrible incident as she said her first words as she took her first steps a few weeks later, and the head doctor was forced to admit Maria was happy to finally be able to meet her family for her daughter's birthday. Her father gave a great gift, paying for her boyfriend's expensive operation. At first, Maria was embarrassed to accept such a generous gift, but she understood that it was important for the man she loved. Well, I hope you enjoyed this incredible story. Don't forget to watch the suggested video and share this stories with some friend. See you in the following video.